Welcome to the April session of the Lunch and Learn Law Enforcement Leadership Conversations. I'm Dr. Robbie Friedman, the founding director of the Georgia International Enforcement Exchange, GILEE, at Georgia State University's Andrew Young School of Policy Studies. GILEE is a law enforcement leadership development program, and we are glad to have all of you join us today. Before we introduce our speakers, I'm pleased to mention that we have more than 130 registered for this session. I'd like to recognize Julian Fantino, the retired commissioner of the Ontario Provincial Police and a former minister in Canada's government, Major General William Nesbitt, former Adjutant General of Georgia. We have 17 police chiefs, we have 19 sheriffs, we have 1 warden, we have members of the IACP Community Policing Committee, corporate security leaders, and GILEE board members. We have attendees from the Bahamas, from Canada, and from Israel. And in the United States, we have participants from Alabama, California, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Missouri, North Carolina, and Wisconsin. With this, I'm honored to present law enforcement leaders who are making important differences in their communities. In February, we had 3 police chiefs. In March, we had 3 heads of state agencies from Georgia and Tennessee. And today, we have sheriffs from Georgia. First is Sheriff Bill Massey, the sheriff of Baldwin County, Georgia. He has been with the Georgia Bureau of Investigations from 1971 to 77. Was chief of police of Milledgeville, Georgia Police Department from 85 to 88. And he was elected as sheriff of Baldwin County in 1988 and is currently serving the 8th term as the sheriff. He is a past president of the Georgia Sheriff's Association, past president of the Constitutional Officers Association of Georgia, served as board member of the Georgia Board of Corrections, and the list is long. He was a member of the GILEE delegation, the 3rd one to Israel in 1995. Next is Sheriff Frank Reynolds of Cherokee County, Georgia. He was elected in 2017 and serving since. He was in the Pickens County Sheriff's Office as a captain from 2008 to 2016. He was in protective services for the Department of State from 2005 to 2008. And he was in the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office as a watch commander from 1994 to 2005. He's a graduate of the FBI National Academy, and he is a member of the 26th GILEE delegation to Israel in 2018. There are several questions that I'd like to share with you and the audience to go ahead and start the conversation. So we are now in the 2nd year of COVID-19, and it's not exactly looking like it's going to go away. Sheriff Massey is one who recovered personally from that menace. And I'm very glad he's doing well and is able to join us. There are a few questions that we put up on a screen for everybody to see that serve as a trigger, if you will, or a teaser for our conversation. So we just put them up on the screen. If you look at the number of law enforcement agencies, there are 18,000 minus a few across the nation. Of those, there are 3,000 sheriff's departments. Some are focusing on jails, courts, and warrants, and some are full service departments. So if you can articulate some of the challenges that you face as a sheriff, that would be very helpful. As we approach the summer, and after a year of significant disturbances, are you and your team doing anything differently this year to engage with the community you protect that you didn't do prior to COVID-19? How do you measure the performance of your deputies and how they interact with local communities they serve? Can you describe how mentorship played a role in your decisions to become a senior leader? And what are your thoughts about police reform? These are all questions that are not only important for leaders, but also for followers and also for the community that you serve. So Sheriff Massey, since you are the senior sheriff, and honored to have you start the conversation.
I appreciate the invitation today. And I think when I first responded with you and looked at the questions, I thought about the new normal, how to navigate. And I'm going to tell you, in 2020, probably presented the biggest challenges and changes to every law enforcement agency. I know Frank Reynolds and I run full service agencies, so we not only do law enforcement, we do jails and courts and do it all. But the jail has really been a specific concern to every sheriff in the state of Georgia. When the COVID situation came up a year and a half ago and people were talking about how prepared everybody was, to be blunt, I think the sheriffs were sort of left out of the loop and we really didn't know what to expect. What I did and what some other people did, I looked at it like the MRSA virus outbreaks, the staph infections we've had in our jails. And we totally changed everything about our jail operations, from questionnaires to taking temperatures of everybody in our jail. We did questionnaires where people have been, what they've done. We provided masks for not only employees, but our inmates. And we truly changed every aspect of how we operated our jails. We view our jails as a big part of not only the public safety footprint in our counties, but from a public health standpoint, with all the booking in, booking out, and interaction with other law enforcement agencies, we had to make sure that our jails were safe and that we perform professionally and sanitarily and tried to keep it out of our system.
Thank you, Sheriff Reynolds.
Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be here today, and it's good to hear your voice. Sheriff Massey, good to see you. Well, like the sheriff said, we had to change a lot of what we were doing. The Cherokee Sheriff's Office services 265,000 people in our community, about 432 square miles. We've got 4 different municipal agencies. So we have a lot going on. Our inmate population at the time was a little over 600. And so what we had to do is we had to take an honest look at what are we doing and how do we mitigate the risk to our jail population. With that population as large as it is, if we had an outbreak, then, we're going to be in dire straits. So what we did initially is we put a notice out to our other law enforcement partners in the community and abroad and said, if you don't have to bring somebody to jail, don't bring them to jail. If you can release them on a copy of the citation, do so. And we were only taking those serious cases into our facility. And when they came in, they had to be masked, they had to be met in the Sally Port by our detention staff, temperature check. They were brought in, they were given a medical screening. Although we do that for all our inmates, obviously this one was temperature regulated in a questionnaire. And if they got bonded out, great. If they didn't, and they had to remain in our jail, we put them in I think we've got about 8 different pods, as we call them. And by putting them in a particular location, we isolated them from the general population and put them under a quarantine for 14 days. And as that pod grew and the inmates were found not to have any issues, then we could put them in our regular population. So we had layers of protection from coming in the back door and from coming in the front door. We had to shut down our training. We had to modify our approach, obviously, when we dealt with the public. And we were very successful in that. In that process, I think about 85 to 90 of our employees over last year have contracted COVID. I had it. I had mild symptoms. I had a persistent cough and some fatigue for about a week. My wife had it. And so we were fortunate that we didn't have a large outbreak all at once with our staff or our inmates. And one more thing is, Sheriff Massey talked initially about some executive orders that came down from the state. We were not included in that initially as sheriffs. The following day we were, but we had to listen to our community. And I'll say that since COVID broke out in our community, we have made 0 arrests for COVID related issues. We've not issued citations. We've had general compliance from our citizens, and they've greatly appreciated our response to that.
In terms of the proportion of activities that the sheriff's offices have, large or small, has the proportion changed? Are you dealing more with law enforcement, less with warrants? If you are a full service department, can you address that?
Well, what we did initially, first order of business was the jail. We worked with our judges, and we got roughly 100 people out of our jail. We changed that footprint. But we also, from a law enforcement response situation, we started handling some calls by telephone that we normally did in person. We took the position that if it was misdemeanor thefts or if it was any problems that we could handle on the telephone or by email, we did not send a deputy in person, which I don't mean we didn't respond to our important criminal cases and calls, but we tried to do just as much as we could do without having personal confrontations or association with people. We also, from an administrative standpoint, we are technically advanced enough that we basically can do all of our administrative work from home or off site. So we really we made a lot of changes. We even got our attorneys to do Zoom meetings. Our judges did Zoom hearings. We did a lot of business in a way that we'd never done business before, that we think not only improved our productivity, but it kept our employees safe as well as the community.
Do you see some of these changes staying after we go back to normal, if that ever happens?
I think we are approaching the new normal. I think we will never go back to the case where all lawyers go inside of our jail. We have our judges read rights in person. I think everything we can do by computer or by Zoom, I think we will do it. I think emails, telephone calls, Zoom meetings, anything that we can do with technology, I think that's going to be your new normal.
So one of the advantages of technology is exactly what we're doing now. We are able to have a Zoom conversation without having to travel and without spending money on it and without wasting time. The side effect, if you will, is that we lose the personal touch with the community. I think for sheriff's offices, this is even more important than for police departments, because your relationship with the community is key, partly because you're also elected. Police chiefs are appointed. You are elected. How does that impact your daily lives?
Well, it does affect it. And about once a year, I'll throw a Massey fit and I'll tell them we're going to get rid of all these cell phones. And from now on, when y'all need to call the office, I want you to go in convenience stores and I want you to go in hardware stores and I want you to meet everybody that runs these businesses and let them know you're part of the community. Twofold with that. One is they're hungry to talk to law enforcement and tell us what's going on in the community. And if you do have personal interaction with them, then I'm going to tell you, you get information that is really quality criminal information, or they give you notice of what's going on in your community. So sometimes technology is a double-edged sword. Sometimes it hurts us as much as it helps us with the community.
Right. Sheriff Reynolds?
One of the things that just happened to be in our timeline is we were in the process of building an additional tower to our jail. That's a 582 additional bed facility. But with that, we had construction in our video visitation. We created a whole system that we had no more face-to-face contact with the inmate. And a large percentage of that were inmate to attorney visits, although they can still do that when they need to have that FaceTime with their client. But this allowed them the opportunity to work from home, have that conversation with their inmate. Our inmates have kiosks. They also have little devices like this that they can communicate with friends and family. Those things are monitored by a company, monitored by our deputies to ensure that there's nothing inappropriate going on. We've also used that for our criminal investigations when they transfer information. So we really minimized our face-to-face contacts from a visitation standpoint with all those inmates and people coming to the facility. The other thing we did was we were allowed to, or we allowed our citizens to obtain their reports or open records request, all those things online. They didn't have to come in to get a copy of their report. They just had to answer some basic information so we knew who we were actually sending it to. There were some backlogs and still are in the court system. When the courts here in Georgia reduced or just stopped jury trials and in court cases, that created a backlog. So one of the things that our Solicitor General for state court misdemeanor offenses, several months ago, they started our parking deck court, if you will. And what they did is they basically set up a kiosk in the parking deck where the judge was in a remote location. The attorney may have been there. It was an open air environment and people could come up and either pay their fine or plead to an offense or whatever the disposition of the case was. And that has also purged a lot of those backlogs. The other thing that we're facing now is the evictions that are on file. So there's a restriction on what we can do to carry out those court orders on evictions. Those have been problematic. And again, working with our municipal partners. But as far as face-to-face with our citizens, our deputies are out there every day. Our community praises them constantly. I constantly get letters of and emails from our citizens telling about their experience or positive interaction with our deputies during COVID and what it meant to them, where deputies would take it upon themselves, not something I would push out, but they'd know people in the community that needed something and they would bring it to them, leave it on their front porch and have that positive interaction. So, you know, it's although been very difficult, there's a lot of good that's come out of it in the humanitarian aspect.
How did the type of criminal activities or incidents affect your work during this past year? Did you have more domestic calls? Did you have more domestic disturbances, spouse abuse, more drugs? Is this year different than previous years in terms of the content of your activities?
We hadn't seen a dramatic increase in crime, believe it or not. And a lot of the people in our community have been extremely worried about the coronavirus, about the problems that we're having with health issues. We had a large number, percentage-wise, of people that died in our community. So I think that may have been one of the things that they really looked at. We are seeing a lot of alcohol abuse. We're seeing a lot of drug abuse. We are literally overwhelmed with the volume of methamphetamine in our community. And I'm sure Sheriff Reynolds sees it up there. We are amazed at not only the volume of methamphetamine, but the price that has dropped, which lets us know that there's just a tremendous supply of methamphetamine in the state of Georgia. Not picking on Atlanta, but as you know, that's a major distribution point for the whole southeastern United States. And the last few investigations that we're involved in, within a few days, we end up having to get feds to help us with interpreters, and we're doing business with cartels. Now, they can say they're not in Atlanta, but I think that they don't want to discuss that with me and Sheriff Reynolds and the rest of the metro area. That's been one of the problems that we've had. I think we are not going to know the true extent of this drug issue until the world really opens up and people start in their homes and really getting out in the community. I think that's when we're going to really notice an explosion in drug addiction and usage. That's what we're seeing here in Baldwin.
Okay. One more question on COVID-related issues, and then I want to move on to leadership issues. There's some discussion and fears that we may face another surge. You look at what's happening in India now, and CDC continues to warn that while they are relaxing some restrictions, there's still a possibility of a surge. How are you preparing for that?
Well, we're communicating with our public health. Our emergency management people have been great with us, providing us protective supplies. We have jail meetings, we discuss it. We're trying to be very open and look at it and keep up with the data. But I do agree, I will be extremely surprised if we don't have another increase in the next few months.
Okay, well, let's, Sheriff Reynolds, anything to add to this?
Just 2 points. One of the things in terms of crime is we're a very proactive law enforcement agency here in the metro area. We're the most northern metro county. We have a reputation of being aggressive on crime. Our criminals know that. We see that. In the past 3 years, I've hired 3 intel analysts that we were able to steal from other agencies to bring here. They're very good at what they do. The intel that we get when we obtain their cell phones and break into those is the communication of, don't go to Cherokee County, meet us over in this county across the border. And that kind of reputation we want to have, tell the criminals, don't come here. If you're going to do it somewhere else. As far as, COVID and another surge, there's a fine balance, as you know, between law enforcement and public health. And, that's my goal. When I listen to our constituents, is what are their needs and desires for personal protection, taking personal responsibility, and then a public health policy. So we err on the side of caution and not to overstep ourselves and exert our law enforcement powers on a public health issue. So we maintain that. A lot of the things that we received were neighbors tattletaling on other neighbors for kids playing basketball, that kind of stuff. So, it's a gauge that we have to balance.
Okay. Well, thank you. Let's move on to leadership issues. And among some of the topics that pertain to leadership is, first of all, recruitment. How is your personnel situation? Are you able to recruit the human resources that you need? What about retention? What about inspiring deputies to serve? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I'm sure that affects every area differently. Over the last 32 years that I've been sheriff, I've run a stepping stone. I've made an agreement with my applicants, my college degrees. You work with us 2 years, I'll help you go anywhere you want to go. GBI, State Patrol, federal agencies. And I've placed 70 some odd people with bigger agencies, but I always had them coming in the back door. Now I'm looking up and the line at the back door is greatly diminished. I think that media is not helping us at all. And we recruit everywhere we go. We are constantly trying to recruit, but quite candidly, if you look at the openings in Middle Georgia with the agencies, we're having a hard time hiring deputy sheriffs and police officers. I'm gonna tell you that we just are not having the numbers of applicants that we had 10 years ago. and it's been dramatic with me. I know that Sheriff Reynolds is in a little different situation being in metro area, but down here in middle Georgia, we're having a hard time. We really are.
Does that impact your retention rate as well?
Well, our retention rate is, we've had a lot of turnover with the media as well as with some law enforcement deaths. We've had some people that have decided to make changes in their lives. We've had some families that have encouraged our deputies to look at a more financially stable environment as well as a safer place to be employed. So I've lost some great people, and I've lost them, and they're going to do great in their new chosen profession, but it's hard for us to replace them.
Sheriff Reynolds?
Well, I've got the best job in the world. I'm going to brag just a little bit. I love bragging on our agency. We don't have a problem retaining our employees because we have some of the best benefits that our county offers to our employees, from retirement, salaries. They may not compete with some of the smaller metropolitan areas. And I don't mean what I'm about to say to be disparaging to anybody, but it's a quality of life in our community. Our community treats us very well. And so, do our deputies want to leave and go work in a more metro area and deal with the things that may come with those locations? Or do they want to be here where they're appreciated for the job that they do? And the other thing is, I support our folks. It's truly my goal to have the deputy that's working the street to be empowered to make informed decisions, as long as they're responsible decisions and their heart's in the right place, but to back their decisions. And if they've messed up, then we'll deal with that. But we give them the support, the tools, the resources to do their jobs. And I'll give you, for instance, one of our patrol captains the other day had to talk with one of the sergeants out on patrol. With all the media attention that's going on out there about law enforcement across the nation, he was wanting to get out of the profession. The report that I got back was the reason he is staying is because he has a command staff that supports him in the job that he does. And, if we have that more in our leadership roles, then I don't think we'll have the walkouts like you see in other places. Fortunately, as the sheriff, and again, I'm going to brag, I don't work for anybody. I work for the people. I don't work for the commissioners. I don't work for mayors. I don't work for council members. I work for the 265,000 people that are in our community, and they support us. And that's why our deputies come here, and people want to be on a winning baseball team, if you will. And so they come here from other agencies because they know they have that support.
Well, in a sense, it's good to know because, go ahead.
Yeah, can I say one other thing?
Absolutely.
Frank Reynolds is not only a good sheriff, but he is in a phenomenal community and area. Law enforcement in this state, we look up sometimes and there's two Georgias. You've got metro, strong economic growth. You've got a whole different situation. Baldwin County, in the last recession, we lost 6,000 plus jobs. We're a county of 42,000 people. A lot of the other areas, other than the dynamic growth in metro and North Georgia, we're struggling in middle Georgia and other places. And I will put my employees up against any deputy sheriffs or law enforcement officers anywhere. But it's getting harder and harder to find those people. And a lot of that is the economic struggles that we're facing here in rural Georgia. Mm-hmm. So it's two different recruiting areas, it's two different financial zones, and it's hard on us.
And now, can I add one more thing? Sheriff, you're absolutely correct in your statement. And I wish you the best down there. I know that you don't have the resources as well as we do. And I'm sorry for that, but to be sheriff for as long as you have and have survived, you must be doing something right. So we appreciate the work you're doing. But one thing that I've noticed in Cherokee County is the number of female applicants and the number of African-American applicants that we've we've seen over the last 3 years that want to come in to this profession to make a positive difference. And you know, that to me, that's kind of a telltale sign. And the young people that we get, I hire deputies at age 19, 18 actually, but they're usually around 19 at the youngest, to be jailers. And these are smart, capable young men and women who want to be a part of the solution, that have great ideas. They, you know, a lot of them are old souls, if you will. And it's very encouraging to me to see those young people with the energy to want to come in and make a difference, despite what the media says, despite the things that they see on social media. They want to be a part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Well, that sort of brings me to the issue of police reform. In the last year, particularly since the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis on May 25th, we're almost about a year from that incident. The calls that range anywhere from defund the police, to redirect funds from the police, to shut police down, to police reform. All of these are fairly undefined demands or statements, yet some departments, like in Minneapolis, LA, New York, they went ahead and made major cuts. I think LA is about $500 million, New York is about $1 billion, Minneapolis was a few million, which they now reinstated, given that they are lacking police on the streets. What are your thoughts about police reform from your perspective, from the chair and the position that you're holding?
Well, I've been doing this a long time, and I started with GBI in 1971. And over the years, I'm going to tell you that Georgia law enforcement and Southern law enforcement has dramatically changed, but specifically Georgia law enforcement. With our sheriffs and our chiefs, we have addressed training, we've addressed policies, procedures. We are constantly trying to upgrade and train our people. Now, law enforcement's made some terrible mistakes, and the media is beating us up. But the majority of us in law enforcement look at these events on television and cannot believe what we're seeing. It's not the norm. It's an extraordinary circumstance, and we don't know how to explain what happens or what has happened with this. Georgia is one of a few states in the nation that has something equivalent to our post council, which addresses the problem with law enforcement officers that violate the law, violate rules, give us policies and procedures. So I think we as a law enforcement community in Georgia, I think we're trying to professionalize. To be honest, when I was president of the Georgia Sheriff's Association and I traveled and went to national conferences, I was really a little shocked at going to some of these meetings and speaking with people. And I would look at our people when I came back and I'd say, look, we're light years ahead of some of these other states. We've tried to address problems. We try to address them locally, and we try to stay involved in our community, and we try to be professional.
Sheriff Reynolds?
Again, I'm in a fortunate position, and I'm sorry to keep bragging. I just, you know, I'm so proud to have inherited such a good agency from my predecessor 4.5 years ago. We are, I think there are 3,081 sheriff's offices throughout the United States. We are of 1% of those sheriff's offices that have a Triple Crown accreditation. That's through our corrections, our GILEE, our medical, and Georgia State certified. And so we have these standards and policies and procedures, and although at times they can be a little frustrating to keep up with all those. But what that does is it gives us a reference point nationally of what those standards look like. So we're kind of ahead of the curve on a lot of this stuff. The 8 can wait. You know, we've been doing that for years. And, you know, with the funding that we have, we can have those accreditations, we can have those standards, we can have that training. So other counties in Georgia, and I know it's across the United States, they have to have the proper funding to have that training, to have the resources that are necessary to you know, have those standards. But you also have to look at each jurisdiction. Then what I did this week, and I know it's only Wednesday, but Monday morning at our command staff meeting, I had our Office of Professional Standards pull our officer-involved shootings over the last 30 years. We've had 11 officer-involved shootings. I mean, that's not a lot. And all of those were white males. And so one of the things that I did yesterday is I reached out to members of our Black community and said, hey, it's a mathematical probability that we're going to have an officer-involved shooting with an African-American. How do we get ahead of the curve so that we can address this issue with our community? And whether it's a justified shooting or not, what does that look like for us? And how are we going to work together to respond to that situation when it happens? And they love the idea. So one of the things that's on the table right now is to have a town hall meeting with our African-American community and hear their concerns. You know, we've experienced some things here recently where we were under a lot of criticism from other parts of the country. Well, I work for our constituents. I don't work for those other places. So what's important to us and our values as a community is what's important to me. And so what I want to do is get ahead of those conversations so that we have answers. And I want them to see what we do, why we do it, and how we do it. But it's each agency is different. And I think what the media tries to portray is we're all a part of this one group in this conspiracy, and we have all the same standards and we do all the same things, and it's not necessarily true. So what we have to do is look at it from a single organization, maybe a region, maybe the state, maybe across the nation. I'm open for those ideas, but they have to be relevant to our job function and what we're trying to achieve.
I've heard often the comparison between law enforcement representatives and representatives of the medical profession, namely doctors. And I've made that comparison often myself. What is interesting is that when doctors are not performing well, those are handled on an individual basis. It's rare that you will hear demands and expectations to shut down hospitals. I mean, the closest to that was in 1970s when the mental asylums were shut down. But hospitals, emergency rooms, you just don't hear that. Yet you do hear that about police. What would be your recommendations to change that image? Because as Sheriff Reynolds said, while it may not happen in your county, there's a national climate that eventually, you know, fashion may take months or years, but it eventually comes over to where you are. How can you face that in time in a positive way?
Well, there's an old Southern saying that all politics begins at home or is local.
Look,
I'm in a different community than Sheriff Reynolds. I live in a community that's almost a 50-50 split, African-American and Caucasian. And we are constantly having interaction with our local members in our community, our faith-based community, our ministers, our NAACP. We try to be open. We're resource officers in our schools. We teach the CHAMPS program. We travel with our ball clubs. We try to remain involved in our community to hopefully, when something nationally happens that is very negative, we like it. And we've had people that support us and say, listen, we back y'all. We're glad y'all are here. We know bad things have happened in Wisconsin, California, wherever. but you got to look at it from a local basis. And we try to do a good job with our local footprint and with our community here. To be honest, we don't have the answers of what happens in other places. We try to be transparent. When the incident happened in Ferguson, Missouri, and I'm not shooting at Ferguson, Missouri, but after about 3 days, when they wouldn't even tell you the name of the police officer involved and tell you what's going on, Ferguson, Missouri has got about 3,000 people. I'm sure everybody out there knew who was involved. It was almost like they're trying to hide something. And I told my people, I said, we have got to be transparent. We've got to let people know what's going on. You can't hide behind a state investigation. You still got to talk locally and let people know what's going on. So, you know, we try to look at the whole scale of problems nationally and globally, but we realize we're going to have to work with our people locally, and that's what we're trying to do. And I'm sure most people try to do that, but that's our position.
I want to turn over now to Colonel Brent Cummings, the Associate Director for GILEE, to handle the Q&A part of the leadership conversations. Brent?
Thanks, Robbie. And gentlemen, sheriffs, thank you both for your service. It's greatly appreciated. I've said before in these lunch and learns, coming from the military, my experience is I'm very grateful for the American public and their thank you for the service that they've given to our military. I believe that same thank you needs to go to each of you and to all those that are on this call today. And thank you for your service and what you're doing to look after our communities and help protect them. A question that's come in is what we've talked a lot about face-to-face. You both talked a lot about some of the face-to-face interactions, but could you maybe address some cyber issues that you're facing and how you're addressing those? It is rampant across the cyber crime. It seems to be only growing and getting more larger problem. And it impacts everything from rural areas to metro and abroad. Do you have specific goals that you're looking for, or how are you combating and looking at some of the cyber issues? Either of you could address that.
Well, even though I'm from a smaller community, I've been amazed at the numbers of people that have been scammed either by computer or by telephone calls. And these criminals, they're slick. They're as good as any group we've ever dealt with. We try to let people know this through our media. We try to put our story on it, and we try to go through the newspapers, television. We try to let everybody know every time we hear of a new kind of scam or something that's coming out on Facebook, coming out on some kind of media source. We try to give people a little bit of a tool to not communicate with them, not give out information, not do that. Once this occurs, we have to reach out to federal agencies, and we reach out with credit card companies, with banks. We have a great relationship with all of the security teams with major corporations. But from a local standpoint, I think our best advice here locally is for us to try to let them know what's going on and be very open. Let them know what's happening and what kind of scams are out there. So that's been our position.
Sheriff Reynolds?
I agree with the sheriff. Is education is a large component of that. What we've done is we've tried to have a large social media footprint to push out that information. And with our retail stores, for instance, the scam where you go to Target and you get some gift cards and so forth, is to try to get those businesses to maybe inquire. Ma'am, I see you're purchasing a large sum of credit cards, and maybe prompt some questions. They have to be careful not to intrude on that. But we've also made up some signs that they can put up on that display that has all those cards to say, stop, are you doing this? Are you getting these cards for these reasons? And here, ask yourself these questions. As you know, it's very difficult to find those people that are committing these scams because of the way that all this has transpired. So as the sheriff said, getting with our federal partners and maybe have some legislation that says, here's some guidelines that we're going to implement in order to minimize that risk. Me personally, I enjoy when they call me and try to get my money, telling me that they're the sheriff or a sheriff's deputy is going to come get them. And I'll listen to them. I like to have a little fun with it, but they're sophisticated. They will actually use, as you know, my name or a specific detective's name, some of the judges. And when our citizens hear that and they hear that, hey, Sheriff Reynolds has got a warrant for you, you need to come down to the office and turn yourself in, or you can handle it by phone because of our COVID restrictions. And if you'll follow this process, we'll dismiss these charges, or you can pay your fines and fees. They're very sophisticated and very convincing. Had I not, been the sheriff or been in law enforcement, I might have been duped.
I'm wondering, let me just jump in. Did you consider any educational campaigns to help citizens know what they're facing, what challenges are coming? Sometimes on the nightly news, you see some reports on scams, but frankly, they're not very helpful. Any self-protection on cyber crimes and cyber victimization, that could go a long way to help the community.
Yes, sir. And we do that, with our local media, whether it be the newspaper or Metro. We try to, have a featured story. We've done that in the past, just to try to push that information out. But every time we get a little ahead of the curve on it, they come out with a new type scam and they're on to something else. So they're very evolving and changing and convincing. So, but you're absolutely right. It's education is the key component, and obviously they target our senior citizens, and they're good people, and they've worked hard for the money. And when they go out and give this money to the scammer of $30,000, that's traumatic for them. They can't recover from that. So, to be able to work with our churches and other civic organizations that might be able to step in and help that individual when they're a victim of these crimes.
It really is a complex world that we are all living in, and only becoming more complex as you deal with combating crime in your jurisdictions. It's hard enough, but to have to face it coming from abroad, internationally, and coming into your communities is just an even more significant challenge. And again, that's why I'm grateful for the efforts that you and your deputies, along with other law enforcement, are doing to protect us. So thank you all for that. Robbie,
I'd like to say one other thing too about cybercrime. Law enforcement, we're not exempt from it. We've had 2 sheriff's offices in the state of Georgia and 1 in Tennessee that I know of, that they went to work one day and guess what? They couldn't get anything out of their computer, right, because all of their files had been seized. We had one called the FBI, called the feds, work on it. They said, hey, this is a Russian issue, can't be done. And I had a sheriff friend of mine that said, I got a murder trial starting Monday. All of my records in there. And they say they'll release my files for X number of dollars. And everybody said, no, you can't do that. And this sheriff said, yeah, I can. So to be honest with you, we had a sheriff that paid the money, and next thing you know, he's got all his files up and he's in murder trial. So, we're not immune to it just because we're government or law enforcement. These computer hackers, they're unbelievable.
Yeah, like we said, it is complex. It's only going to continue. It's something, Sheriff, I can bring it up to the ransom attacks against law enforcement. I read this week. The police department in DC has had much of their files, as you're mentioning, stolen, and preventing them from doing what you're mentioning. So awareness for deputies, awareness for law enforcement, along with citizens, is something that we all have to be vigilant about going forward. Well, thank you both, gentlemen. Robbie, I'll turn it back to you as we're coming towards the close time for our gathering.
Thank you, Brent. Thank you, Sheriff Massey and Sheriff Reynolds. Great to be with you again, and appreciate you taking the time to be with us today and sharing your thoughts about law enforcement challenges, COVID-19, and then some. Have a good and healthy day, week, months, year. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.